Hey everyone! In this video, I'm going to show you how to knit the head and tail of a bunny rabbit. The techniques and stitches you'll need for this animal are stockinette, basic increases and decreases, mattress stitch for the seams, moss stitch for the ears, and a pom-pom for the tail. You'll need about 3 ounces of DK or sport weight yarn, or about 3 to 4 times that if you're using a bulky weight yarn. You'll also need about a yard of darker contrast yarn for the eyes and face details. Use knitting needles that are at least 2 sizes smaller than what's recommended for the yarn you're using. And some other things you'll need are stuffing, scissors, a tapestry needle, and some type of row counter so you can keep track of which row you're on. With each of my animals, I like to include a list of that animal's attributes. Bunnies are sociable, loving, sensitive, joyful, affectionate, clean, quiet, curious, and athletic. This video focuses only on the head and tail. All my animals use the same body and leg patterns, so I've made separate videos for those pieces. If you want to have longer feet like this bunny, be sure to follow that pattern for the lower legs and then use the basic pattern with round feet on the upper legs or arms. For this ballerina bunny, I didn't do any color changes on the lower legs for socks, just the plain legs with long feet. You can find links to these additional videos in the description. Okay, let's get started with the head. We're going to start at the nose and work our way back to the back of the head. Cast on 8 stitches for the nose, and be sure to leave a long tail for sewing with later. On row 1, purl across. On row 2, knit 1 and then increase 1 all the way to the end, and then knit to the last stitch. For my increases, I like to knit into the stitch just below the stitch on my right needle, which is often called a make 1 increase. After the 7 increases, you should have 15 stitches. On row 3, purl across. On row 4, knit the first 2 and make 1, then repeat the pattern of knit 3 and make 1 till you get to the last stitch and just knit it. When you're done, you should have 20 stitches. Purl across on row 5. On row 6, knit the first 5 and then repeat the pattern of knit 2 and make 1 4 times and knit the last 7 stitches. And that should give you 24 stitches. Purl across on row 7. On row 8, knit 2, make 1, and then repeat the pattern of knit 4 and make 1. Do that 5 times, and then knit the last 2. When you're done, you should have 30 stitches. Purl across on row 9. On row 10, knit 3, make 1, and then repeat the pattern of knit 5 and make 1 5 times, and knit the last 2. When you're done, you should have 36 stitches. Purl across on row 11. On row 12, knit 4, make 1, and then repeat the pattern of knit 6 and make 1 5 times, and knit the last 2. When you're done, you should have 42 stitches. Rows 13 through 17 are just simple stockinette with no increase or decreases. So go ahead and purl on the wrong sides and knit on the right sides, and I'll meet you back here when you're ready to start row 18. On row 18, knit the first 5 and make 1. Then repeat the pattern of knit 7 and make 1, do that 5 times, and then knit the last stitch. And that should give you 48 stitches. Rows 19 through 24 are just simple stockinette again without any increases or decreases. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here when you're ready to start row 25. On row 25, we start decreasing at the back of the head. Purl the first 3 and then purl 2 together. Then the pattern is purl 6 and purl 2 together. Do that to the last 3 stitches and purl those. When you're done, you should have 42 stitches. Knit across on row 26. On row 27, purl the first 2 and then purl 2 together. Then the pattern is purl 5 and purl 2 together. Do that to the last 3 stitches and then purl those. When you're done, you should have 36 stitches. Knit across on row 28. On row 29, purl the first 2, then the pattern is purl 2 together and purl 1. Do that across to the last stitch and purl it. You should have 25 stitches. Knit across on row 30. On row 31, purl the first stitch, and then purl 2 together across to the last 2, and purl those individually. And you should have 14 stitches when you're done. Knit across on row 32. Row 33 is the last row. Purl the first stitch and then purl 2 together across to the last stitch and purl it. You should have 8 stitches when you're done. Don't cast off here. Instead, cut your yarn, leaving enough to sew the seam and to attach the head to the body later. Thread this tail onto a tapestry needle and then carefully thread the tail back through each stitch on the needle. Just to be safe, I like to thread the tail through the same stitches once more. Pull tight to make a nice closure. Now sew the bottom head seam a little less than halfway from the back to the neck at the bottom of the head. Next, take the tail that you left at your cast on edge. Weave this through the cast on stitches and then sew up the head seam, leaving a wide enough opening at the bottom where you can stuff the head. That finishes up the main headpiece for now. We'll add the face details and ears later when we're ready to assemble. Now let's knit the ears. I like the bunny best with long floppy ears. In the written pattern, I include a pattern for upright ears as well, but I have found that with time, the upright ears start to droop a little. I also just like the look of the floppy ears better. I use moss stitch for the ears because it's a reversible pattern that looks the same on both sides. That's nice for something like ears that you end up seeing both sides of. Moss stitch is sort of a combination of seed stitch and ribbing. You'll start with a row of K1P1 stitches. On the even rows, you'll knit in the knit stitches and purl in the purl stitches, just like you do in ribbing. And then on the odd rows, you'll knit in the purls and purl in the knits, as you do in seed stitch. I like to think of the odd rows as odd, as in weird or different, to help me remember this pattern. So start by casting on 16 in the body color. On row 1, knit 1 and purl 1 across to the end. On row 2 and in all even rows, knit in the knit stitches and then purl in the purl stitches. On row 3 and in all odd rows, purl in the knit stitches and knit in the purl stitches. Repeat rows 2 and 3 11 times until you have 25 rows in moss stitch. And meet me back here when you're ready to begin row 26. At row 26, we begin decreasing at the bottom of the ears. The pattern from here will be similar to what you've been doing, but will decrease once at the beginning of each row. So for the even rows, we'll knit the first stitch and then knit 2 together, and then continue moss stitch for even rows, knitting in knits and purling in purls. On the last 2 stitches, always knit 1 and purl 1. On the odd rows, beginning with row 27, purl the first stitch, and then purl 2 together. And then continue moss stitch for odd rows, purling in knits and knitting in purls. On the last 2 stitches, always knit 1 and purl 1. Continue repeating these last 2 rows until you get to row 38. At row 38, you can cut the yarn and thread it through the remaining stitches on the needle, then weave this end in. Fold the ear in half and sew the cast on edge. Then sew the ear to the side of the head with the ear hanging down and the opening to the front. I also like the ear placed right in the middle of the head, not too far back and not too far forward. And now we're ready for the tail. I love to use a pom-pom for bunny tails. You can buy little tools that help you make a pom-pom, but my favorite method just uses fingers, and here's how. Spread 2 fingers on one hand to the size of the pom-pom you need. I like to use my forefinger and middle finger so that my thumb is free to use later. Wrap the yarn around these fingers in a figure 8, crossing in the middle. Wrap as few as 30 or as many as 100 until you get to the size of the pom-pom you want. Carefully pull the figure 8 bundle off your fingers, holding tightly where the strands cross. Then tightly tie a strand around the center X where the strands cross and secure this with at least one strong knot. Now cut the ends of the loops, being careful not to cut the yarn that's holding the wraps together. And trim the ends so that they're even. Use the yarn that you tied the pom-pom together with to sew the tail into position on the back near the widest part of the body. Now let's assemble the head. As I mentioned earlier, I have separate videos for knitting the body, arms, and legs and assembly, so in this video I'm focusing only on assembling the head. Grab some scissors, a tapestry needle, some stuffing, and a scrap of darker yarn for the eyes and nose. Stuff the stuffing through the little hole you left at the bottom of the head, and be careful not to add so much that it makes the stitches spread apart. And now let's sew the nose. For the bunny, I like to embroider a little Y right at the tip of the nose. Take the dark yarn that you'll use for the eyes and pull it out at one side of the cast-on edge. And then go back down in just below that cast-on edge. And then come back out in an area that's right across from where you came out for the first side. And go back in where you did on the first side. And then make a line from the bottom that connects to where the 2 lines come together. Now let's add the eyes. For most animals, the eyes look best below the forehead and closer to the nose. A French knot works well for the eyes. Pull the yarn out at the position where you want the eye, then stick your needle back in through that same place and come back out 1 stitch away. Don't pull the yarn all the way through, but leave a little loop that you can stick your needle into. Pull the loop snug, but not too tight, against the needle, and then while holding it in place, wrap the yarn 5 to 6 times around the needle. More wraps will give you a larger eye, but more loops can also be difficult to manage and sometimes creates an eye with not so clean edges. Then hold the loop and wraps carefully with one hand as you pull the needle and yarn through them, creating a little circle of loops. To secure the little circle of loops into position, I like to add a couple more loops by stitching close near the bottom of the eye on the head and then coming back out through the center of the loops. I like to do this a few times until the eye feels secure on all sides. Follow these same steps to add the second eye. Sew the ears to the left and right sides of the top and back of the head, not too far back or too far forward, but right in the middle of the two sides of the head. I like to start by holding them into position with my hands just to get an idea of where they look best, and then I use the yarn tails to sew a few stitches temporarily, and then I move back and forth between the two ears, sewing a little more on each side as I go. This can take some time, but it's not good to rush here because the position of the eyes and ears can make a huge difference in the final look of your animal. And now we can sew the rest of the bottom head seam. Find the original yarn that was used to sew the head seams, and then stuff all the straggling ends inside the head. Then finish sewing the seam, leaving just an end of yarn for sewing the head to the body later. Sew the head onto the neck of the body, and then sew the tail onto the back near the widest part of the body. And here's how it looks when it's all done. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel so you can get notified when I release new animal and clothing patterns. See you next time!